In an important battle for NA's last chance to get out of the group stage, they take on RNG to help dictate the fate of Group D. The meta has been continuing to evolve like crazy these days, and teams have foregone whatever the normal flow of the meta is in favor of simply playing what works for them. These adaptations have been super interesting, and I wanted to use these games to sort of give some insights as to the drafting decisions that these teams go for. As always, if you enjoyed content like this, feel free to drop a sub to support the channel. Let's hop in the draft. Starting with the first phase bans, RNG banned out Maokai, Azir, and Bel'Veth, while 100T banned out Lissandra, Galio, and Aatrox. I think the bans are reflecting a slight change in the priorities that teams have, since there are so many different viable styles in the meta right now. 100T are not banning simply for what's good on red side, but rather they are trying to mold the draft so that RNG's picks are limited to specific styles that 100T can play around. Lissandra and Galio are two champions that have very aggressive game pacing, and 100T is historically a team that functions best when playing a slow and controlled early game, so they want the draft in that direction. That's why you should notice that they probably left Yuumi intentionally open. With this being the main priority pick for RNG to take, this means that RNG have to play around what the Yuumi brings to the table, which is a very slow bottom lane. I'm not 100% sure if this was intentional, but regardless of whether it was or not, I think it shifts the draft favorably for 100T despite giving up a priority pick. As a response, 100T handshake the slow lane in the bottom side in the Seraphine Senna combo. This is a classic pairing for teams that love playing that slow style. This instant pickup also feeds into the way that I feel like 100T prepared for this draft specifically. For the B2B3, RNG swing to complete the Sivir Yuumi pairing, as well as actually blind out the Fiora here. There's a lot of options for what RNG want to round out their first phase with, and the fact that they swing for Fiora here this early indicates to me that they're both afraid of losing it in phase 2 bans, as well as the fact that they feel like they need what the Fiora brings to the table. This is even over priority picks like Sejuani in this case, keep in mind. 100T opt to respond to this Fiora blind in kind by taking one of the only good matchups available in the Renekton. I think this is a pretty smart use of the R3 slot actually, because your whole draft now has favorable matchups when compared to RNG. Renekton has a ton of agency in the early game here against Fiora and negates a lot of what she wants to do in terms of getting an advantage. Moving on to the phase 2 bans, both teams are completely matched in terms of roles picked, with similar styles overall. With mid and jungle remaining for both teams, there's a few ways that we can see some adaptations in team fighting styles. For mid, we mainly see the contrast between some of the classic control mages, as well as more aggressive champions such as Sylas or Akali. In jungle, we can see both styles come out as well, but it's a little more clear that both teams will resort on some frontliners here. The bans reflect this dynamic as RNG removed both Viego and Sejuani, while 100T removed Graves and Sylas. The only ban I would be weirded out by in this case is actually the Graves ban, because I don't think RNG have the resources in this case to actually afford to slot Graves into their comp. Especially considering the fact that the frontline facilitator mid champions in Galio and Lissandra have already been removed from the draft previously, this ban could have been reoriented to potentially ban something like Akali for 100T, as Graves is not really viable here. In R4, we feel the need for this ban as well, as the R4 Victor, seeing this chance to play relatively aggressive, RNG pivot for a much more forward comp with Vi and Akali. Right now, the biggest thing that 100T's comp is weak to is peeling for its main carries, so I think this is a great pivot with this goal in mind, as well as playing into a favorable matchup for mid. For R5, 100T unfortunately have to use it in jungle here, so there's not necessarily that much they can really flex around in this case in order to garner an advantage. I think if anything, I would have liked to see them pick jungle R4 here in this case for this reason. I think they have some issues in draft with Abedage having a relatively small champion pool though, so this does tend to warp the resources in draft here. Jarvan is the pick in the end, and although I think it does a good job in potentially locking down the Sivir Yuumi pick, the rest of the team on 100T might have too many needs in terms of peel that they need to answer. With as much dive as there is on the RNG side, 100T have to play these fights very tight, so Jarvan might not be able to be played as optimally as it'd like here. I do think it's probably one of the best picks to go for remaining though. Overall, I think this draft highlights the strengths of both teams in this case, and I honestly believe that 100T made some smart moves relative to how they play as a team. RNG clearly are also playing to their strengths, once again leading a rewarded aggressive play. 100T also have winning matchups on both sides here honestly, and I really like the creativity of allowing certain picks to go through on the side of them, which in turn made for a relatively even draft overall. In terms of strategizing and crafting team compositions, 100T have done as good of a job as you could expect, and I actually rate this an even draft overall. As always though, I hope this analysis was insightful to you guys, and I'll catch you in the next one. Stay fresh.